Have you ever felt really fired up about making changes to the way that you eat? It feels really possible and you are looking forward to feeling better, improving your health, maybe losing weight or changing your body composition. And so you're feeling very motivated. And if you've been in this place before and you watch my videos, chances are what you're experiencing is that that doesn't seem to last. At some point, the part of you that is chaotic and out of control just seems to reemerge. And so despite you experiencing yourself as somebody who is desperate to make these changes, this self-sabotaging part just keeps making an appearance. And in this video, I want to talk about that, what it is and what you might be able to do to have a different experience so that you don't feel like you're constantly sabotaging your efforts. I often refer to that part that seems to just want to burn everything to the ground and thwart your efforts as the rebel. In myself and a lot of people I work with, they really relate to this idea of having an inner rebel that doesn't seem to want them to do well. And it's frustrating. It feels like you've got this split personality and you don't know which side of you is going to show up at any given time. And it's really hard to know which one is you. And if you're anything like me, which one is me is just whichever one seems to be live. So when I'm stuck in rebel mode and I feel like I am just not helping myself, I'm frustrated, I'm feeling shame, I'm full of doubt, and that other version of me that sometimes seems to have it together doesn't even feel real. It's like, this is who I really am, this messier, more self-destructive version of myself. And I want to liken that version to Severus Snape from Harry Potter. And for anyone who hasn't watched or read Harry Potter, Snape is someone who treats Harry really badly and just seems to be doing whatever he can to make Harry's life harder. And as the story unfolds, we find out that there are reasons, there's context for why Snape is as horrible to Harry as he is. Rightly or wrongly, there's context that makes his behavior more understandable. And in the end, he's acting for the higher good. So if we liken this to the rebel's behavior comes from emotional pain, like old emotional stuff and patterns, experiences that we've had, and also a desire to protect. Another way of thinking about that rebel part of us is simply resistance. If we don't have resistance to something, we're not going to experience our rebel coming out. If all parts and all aspects of us are on board with a certain course of action or a certain idea, we're not in conflict. We're just going to follow that through, and our actions and our emotions and our thoughts will be harmonious, all heading in the same direction. So when the rebel is triggered, it's because something is out of alignment. There's resistance to something. The rebel is perceiving a threat or trying to avoid emotional pain, which could also be a kind of threat. It could be a biological threat. So the rebel is fearful that you're not going to have enough food. And that could be tied into a past experience threat, where perhaps in the past, if you've gone through a lot of cycles of restriction, the rebel is predicting where this might end up, and it wants to stop it as soon as possible. There's a psychological threat. If we feel like our freedom is threatened, our freedom to make choices, and that somehow we've lost autonomy, and now instead of being in control, it feels like we're being controlled, that's going to trigger the rebel. And then the emotional threat, which you could think of as emotional unmet needs or trying to avoid an emotional experience. So one for me was I found it absolutely unbearable to be present with myself at times. I was so full of shame that I needed a means of checking out. And food became the most effective way for me to do that. So it would be all very well when I'm in the swing of things and going, oh, I'm really motivated to change the way that I eat. But the moment I hit something or I bumped up against something inside me and I thought, this is unbearable. I don't want to be with this. Not even this. I don't want to be with me or even be me right now. I'm just going to check out with food and TV for the afternoon. Ultimately, if we don't want to be controlled by this part of us, we have to have a better relationship with that part of us. So if we can even begin by thinking, okay, this part is trying to help. Because when you're in it and it's triggered and it feels so against what you feel like you, the part of you that you think of as you, is so against what you want, you can end up in this space of, for me, it would look like, I must hate myself so much. There must be a part of me that really wants to destroy myself. What is this part? This part must be dark and destructive. It's like when we talk about having demons, we talk about people having demons in them. And I'm talking about the metaphorical use of it, not the literal, because that's what the rebel can feel like, because it's a split off part. So it doesn't feel like it is us, but yet somehow we're carrying it inside of us. So it can kind of sound a bit like, oh, well, guess we're screwed. We can't even try and change the way we eat because we're going to keep triggering these parts. And I don't think that's true. I think we can make conscious decisions around food, to make more harmonious decisions around food, that it's not just like, oh, okay, well, these parts are going to keep being activated, so I just have to listen to them, let them run the show, and try not to judge myself. I mean, it's probably better than what you're already doing when you're stuck in that self-shame. Self-shame? Can there be any other kind of shame? You know what I mean? I think I was going to say self-judgment and shame, and I just put them together. But I think what it actually takes to change our behavior around food, to get to a place where we can make more harmonious decisions, it's actually about facing those parts and not seeing them as the villain. So it's a curiosity. So I would always, whenever I felt like I was out of control again with food, I would always go straight into self-blame. Like I lacked willpower, I lacked discipline, I was inconsistent. I can't even find the words really to describe how I felt because it was so visceral. So the language doesn't really do it justice. But when, okay, these parts are becoming active and we don't want them to take over, it's the shift from blame to curiosity. And I know it sounds like, well, if I'm just curious and I'm not kind of giving myself a good telling off, then I'm just going to care less and I'm just going to carry on behaving in this out of control way. My experience was I spent years trying to blame myself into doing better, and it just didn't work. It didn't change anything, whereas curiosity actually did. Because it changes the energy when we believe, okay, we've gone completely out of control with food again, but there's a part of us that is trying to assist us in some way. We then approach, like how we react and recalibrate ourselves afterwards is very different than when we are full of like emotion and catastrophization. Curiosity is regulating. And when we feel more emotionally regulated, that is going to be reflected in more harmonious decisions. And I use the word harmonious. I like it as a word. I've only today thought of using this word a bit more when we're talking about what the goal is here. Harmonious decision is like all the parts of us are kind of like lined up enough. You can't just put your hands on a piano and slam them down on a load of keys and hope that it makes a nice sound. We're learning the notes, if you like, of who we are and trying to find a different way to play them. And when we get better at listening to our parts, it opens up the possibility for flexibility. Because if you're someone who's been out of control, what often happens is when you're trying to take control with food, is you put in your rules and your boundaries. And sometimes in the beginning, it's like, oh gosh, this feels great. Because whilst I've got these rules in place, I'm not negotiating with myself constantly. And then after a period of time, sometimes minutes, sometimes days, weeks, or months, part of you, part of the rebel tribe, instead of feeling in control, starts feeling like it's being controlled by those rules. So I'm not completely anti having boundaries around food, having things about like, okay, I don't eat in this circumstances, this or this or this. As a concept in and of itself, I'm not just automatically anti that. What is important is that all of the parts of you can be on board with the fact that actually this feels like the best course of action for us. And there could be a rebel part that's not very rational, that is kicking off about a very, very reasonable boundary around food. And that's when that part needs to be really listened to and given room to breathe and feeling the discomfort of that. But what happens is that part comes in and then the other part of us tenses up because that part's come in to go into conflict with the part of us that wants to stay in control, the part of us that wants to be free. And the minute we've locked into conflict, we've got resistance on both sides. And this is going on inside us. It's why we talk about battling with ourselves. And like this is a constant mental fight around food because we haven't learned how to, I say tolerate, but almost welcome those feelings of tension and resistance that we're always going to be facing, because it would be naive to say we're always going to make a decision that every single part of us is on board with. That may not be possible. I think the major shift here is a shift in attitude about wanting to work with these rebellious parts instead of, I'm just determined to find a way to defeat them. Because if you keep going into battle with them, they're going to keep fighting back. And because they both exist inside of you, neither one can die. So like it or loathe it, they're here to stay. When we prioritize that inner peace above all, that is then reflected in more peaceful decisions. But the need for control often comes from fear of these other parts of us that can be out of control. There might even be a bit of faith required to be able to take that leap, to move towards, and maybe just play around with this stuff. It's really hard to give very specific tips because we're all dealing with these different dynamics within us. And so we're watching all these YouTube videos and reading books and listening to podcasts, trying to understand ourselves. And I think that that is helpful because there's information out there that is going to help us to conceptualize it. But at some point, it's going to involve spending some time actually listening to those parts of us. And I have done it before. I've sat with a journal and I've written out conversations as they're going on inside of me, back and forth. I mean, it would look like the writings of a madwoman to anybody else, but it's really organizing, in my own mind, to be able to do that. And I feel so much more centered and more like a cohesive one person than fragmented and different versions popping up here and there. And then I don't understand my behavior and I don't know why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. It doesn't make sense to me. When I give it a voice, it's not always rational. It's not always cool and analytical. In fact, it's often not. But it's context. We're not even looking at excuses here. We're looking at context. So back to the Severus Snape example, the way he treats Harry in the earlier books, not excusing that behavior. He was a bit of an arse to him. But when we look at it in the context of his history, it starts to make sense and maybe we can find a bit of compassion. And that's what I'm inviting you to do for yourself. On a tangential note, just to remind people, towards the end of September, I'm running an in-person weekend for people who have ADHD and binge eating. So if you feel like you don't have to have a diagnosis, but if you relate to having both of those things and you want to connect with other people in that situation and meet with me and do some work together over the weekend, I'll pop a link below. I also have my intuitive eating course coming up, which I deliver live. That's also starting in September and that's online on a Wednesday evening UK time. I will also pop the link to that below. It would be great to meet some more of you, say in person or online. I don't really put stuff out there that's all pre-recorded. I try to do pre-recorded courses, but ultimately I want to be interacting with people. So even sometimes doing something like YouTube, it's I would rather be talking to people. That said, sometimes when I'm sitting here, I do really feel like I'm talking to you. Anyway, I really am going off on a tangent, so I'm going to end it there. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you on the next video.